Welcome in to the I-80 Boys College Football Show. We're talking some Nebraska Cornhusker football record prediction video today, Christian. I'm going to get us started with the offense. Not much to talk about last year's offense for the Huskers, as we know. 18 points per game. That was 123rd in the country. It was pretty goddamn bad last year. They also, which what I harp on and you harp on all the time, they were second worst in the country with the most turnovers. It was ugly last year. Multiple quarterback issues. Couldn't hang on to the football when you hand it off. Very, very ugly offensively last year. But the great thing about Nebraska this year, they returned 10 starters to this offense. So, yeah, new year for Nebraska. This is probably one of the most hype years I can remember for the Huskers as far as offseason goes. And why is that? It's Dylan Raiola, the five-star quarterback, the kid that transferred from Georgia to Nebraska just recently or this offseason. His dad was an All-American center at Nebraska. He's the nephew of Husker O-line coach Donovan Raiola. No doubt in my mind that he's going to be the starter week one. There is some rumors floating around. People don't know. I obviously live in Nebraska, big Husker fan, but there's no doubt in my mind this kid start week one against UTEP. So as important as the quarterback position is for Nebraska, Christian, they need some help for the wide receiver position. Last year, that was a really down year for the wide receivers. My big thing is with the receivers here, it's going to have to be Jamal Banks and my man Malachi Coleman. Very, very talented wide receivers out of high school. They need to step up this year, get open, and make some plays out there this year for Raiola in the passing game. Now, another guy I want to talk about, and he had a hell of a spring game, is Thomas Fidone. This kid, I think, is going to be one of the top 10 tight ends in the country this year. He's a name you want to watch. He's very athletic, great hands. Got a little bit of Brock Bowers in him, to be honest with you. I can't believe I'm putting that comparison up there, but I hope he has that type of season this year for the Huskers. So, Gabe Irving, he's going to lead the backfield this year. He started last year, had a horrible knee injury. He actually started off really, really good. We have a trio of backs, though, back there this year, so we should be pretty good that way, too. I expect Nebraska to run the football. They were second in the Big Ten, believe it or not, last year in rushing for a team that only won 5 games. So I expect a good run game this year. But in order to have a good run game, we talk about it all the time on this channel, Christian, I know you do, is up front with that offensive line. Nebraska did a great job of run blocking, but as we talk about, pass blocking is a whole different issue. And Nebraska struggled last year. Their grade was pretty low in pass blocking. If anybody watched the Huskers last year, a lot of those turnovers were caused not only by the quarterback throwing those, but not having any time to throw the ball. So they got to get that improved. And I believe, Matt Rule and that offensive coordinator is going to get that job done this year. So, Christian, I'm going to throw it over to you, though, for the defense. Let me know, my man.
Yeah, Chris. I mean, look, last year, as bad as Nebraska's offense was, their defense was just as good. I mean, here's the thing. They were surprised considering how bad they were 2 years ago. I mean, they really were, I think, one of the worst defenses in college football. Not the worst, but they were up there. Tony White did a hell of a job, right? They ranked 11th last year in total defense. Hell of a job to them. Look, it also helped, and let's be honest, it also helped how bad the Big Ten West was last year as far as offense. I think they were historically bad, right? Obviously, we know Big Ten West is gone. There is no more divisions. But yeah, I mean, it was bad. Look, their whole defensive line is back. Nash Hutchmacher, he's a big anchor right there at the nose position. Ty Robinson, he is a big run stopper for him. And Jamari Butler, he led the team last year with 5.5 sacks. I think they're going to be really, really solid up front this year, Chris. Linebackers going to be led by Javin Wright and John Bullock, who combined for 101 tackles last year. And also look out for Syracuse transfer Stephen Thompson. He had 172 tackles already, at this point in his career. So pretty good. So a lot of depth there at the front seven for him. Secondary going to be just as good, led by Tommy Hill, who had 4 picks. And the leading tackler from last year, Isaac Gifford, is back at safety. Look, Chris, Nebraska, they're going to have a really great defense this year. And I think this group can do something special as far as that's concerned. With that being said, Chris, let's kind of turn it over here. Let's get into the record predictions. I'll start us off. Look, I'll go right into it. I got Nebraska going 7-5 this year. Okay, we'll start. I think UTEP, Colorado, Northern Iowa. Pretty easy slate there. Now Colorado is the real question mark there, right? But the game is in Lincoln. Nebraska's looking for the revenge factor this year. They've got a quarterback. It's early in the season. I think the same way that Colorado was really good last year, early in the season, I think Nebraska could be just as good early this year in this season. Okay, Illinois, they get to play them, I believe, at home. And so, again, Brett Bielema is tough. I still think Nebraska gets the win there. They got to go on the road and play at Purdue. Again, I think they're up for this game. You get to play Rutgers at home. So to me, I think the season for them, could they lose these games? Absolutely. I really think Nebraska will be undefeated going into the first game against Indiana. They travel on the road. They got to go play Indiana. I think Indiana got James Madison's coach. They're building something there too. I think, like I said, Chris, I think Indiana might be able to pull an upset there. It's the week before Ohio State. They might get caught looking ahead a little bit. Anything can happen. Obviously, they got to go play Ohio State on the road. Something tells me that Nebraska's not going to be able to pull that one out either, right? UCLA, they get them at home. I think UCLA is kind of reeling right now after Chip Kelly left. I think Nebraska can beat them. Then we've got Wisconsin. USC. 5. Yeah. Sorry. USC's my fourth loss right there. Listen, you got to travel to play on the road at USC. Lincoln Riley's shored up his defense is one Achilles heel. I think it's going to be a great game. I think it'll be a close game, but I do think USC will win that game. Then you got Wisconsin. We know Luke Fickell's building. They got a quarterback of their own in Tyler Van Dyke who can be super streaky. But I do like Luke Fickell as a coach. I think their program last year, if I'm not mistaken, it was a little further along, right, than Nebraska. Not by much, but just a little further along. Year 2, I like them. Give me Wisconsin in that one. Yeah. And I would say, lastly, at Iowa. Let's just break it down real quick. Last year was a very close game in regards to Nebraska and Iowa. Let's be honest, Chris. We talked about Iowa already. They haven't done much to address their quarterback needs, or their offense, I should say, in that regard. Nebraska has. So I like Nebraska in that one. Chris, I'll shut up. I'll throw it over to you. Tell me why I'm right or tell me why I'm wrong.
Man, no, I like it. Nebraska hasn't made a bowl game, guys, in over 8 years. So I predicted Nebraska to win 6 last year. It didn't happen. We couldn't win a game, obviously, in the last month. We lost 4 straight. I have Nebraska going 8-4, and I am probably the hardest person you're going to find on the internet on Nebraska. I'm pretty tough on them. I do think this season is going to be pretty good, and it's crazy to me, Christian. You mentioned the one loss that I didn't think you would mention, who I have on here. I do think Nebraska gets away with the win with Colorado. Obviously we start the season off UTEP. I think that's a dub. We get Colorado at home. I do think we win that game against Colorado. I do think that's a must-win game for Nebraska, and I think Nebraska fans will agree with me. Northern Iowa shouldn't be a problem. Illinois is not going to be anything special this year. And Purdue, you're right. We should start off there. Rutgers will be a tough game. That one, I know people outside of Rutgers don't know anything about Rutgers, but Greg Schiano's a decent enough coach. He's been coaching for a while. That'll be a tough one, but I do have Nebraska winning that, starting the season off 6-0. I do have them dropping the Indiana game, which you mentioned, which is kind of crazy. And to allude to your point, I think maybe Nebraska's kind of looking ahead, right? Looking ahead at that Ohio State game, maybe gets tripped up against Indiana. So there's my one loss. Number 2, obviously, is Ohio State. We're not beating Ohio State this year. As much as I would like to speak it into existence, it's not going to happen. UCLA, it'll be a tough game, I think, on the road, but I think we can win that one. Excuse me, that's at home. I apologize. Then at USC, if you followed the USC video that we released, make sure, by the way, to go ahead and like that. I think Nebraska drops that game. I think that game is close, like you mentioned, Christian, but we got to travel out to the West Coast. That puts us at a little bit of a disadvantage, and I do think Lincoln Riley does get his defense addressed, like you mentioned. Now, I do have us beating Wisconsin. I think that's going to be a really, really good game. I think that's a coin flip game. Unfortunately, you guys, if you followed now so far, I have us losing to Iowa, and it pains me to say that. We did an Iowa prediction video. I got to stick to the script here. Only reason why I'd lean Iowa in this game strictly is because it's at Iowa. Now, we did beat them there 2 years ago. I think this game is a coin flip game basically too. Nebraska has a chance though overall, Christian, to do something very special this year. Not only get to a bowl game, but if we were to win 7 or 8 games, that's a hell of an improvement over the past 8 or 9 years. So I want to ask you something though. And this is the one question I was really looking forward to asking you. What is the floor? What is the ceiling with Nebraska this season?
100%. Before I get into that, let me just say this, because I said 7-5. I miscounted. I only counted 4 losses on there. Okay. What I wrote down here was a surprise loss. So maybe somewhere between Illinois, Purdue, and Rutgers. Okay. They go 2-1 throughout that slate. So that would be a surprise loss against somewhere maybe throughout the rest of that schedule. That's where that other loss would come from. What's the floor? Well, Chris, Nebraska's biggest issue, like you said, is still continue to plague them, turning the football over and not being able to win close games. I haven't seen that with Matt Rule. I don't know if he's bred that out of this program yet. He's brought in a lot of players. He's got a good coaching staff. I can't really – there's a part of me that doesn't want to believe it until I see it. Now, I don't think they're going to have any issues with UTEP, but let's be honest, a 4 or 5 win season could be in the cards for him. Right? You're starting a true freshman quarterback who's never played college football before. Weird shit can happen. You've got a really good defense, that we know of, and the offensive line has to be able to hold up and protect this true freshman quarterback. The program has to put this monkey off their back before they can go any further, right? Colorado can get them. Illinois can clip them. Purdue may shock everybody and have a Northwestern-like run and somehow beat them. Rutgers is not an easy out. We know at Indiana, that's not going to be an easy one. Ohio State, UCLA, USC, Wisconsin, right? They all have consistency. They all have had a better decade than Nebraska has had, if we're being honest. And then you talk about at Iowa, right? The game is at Iowa, so that's not going to be easy by default. So I think, I would say 4 or 5 wins may be the floor for this team. But I think on the other side of it, what's the ceiling? I could really see maybe an 8 or 9 win season if everything bounces their way. If they start the season off and they go 6-0 and they go into that game against Indiana, they take it seriously. Who's to say they can't win their 7th game there? Go on the road, still won, or at home. UCLA, you got them right there. USC, Wisconsin, Iowa. Again, these are all beatable teams for them. The USC game, a lot more beatable than against Ohio State, I think for sure. But, that's kind of where I lean with them. Chris, let me throw it back to you. What's your floor? What's your ceiling for them?
I think out of all the teams that we've covered so far on this channel, Christian, I think Nebraska's probably got the most difference, you know what I mean, as far as floor and ceiling. I mean, most of the teams were pretty consistent, I think, as far as 3-4 wins, losses in there. But I think Nebraska, I'm with you 100% on this, could have a 4 or 5 win season if things get ugly. You mentioned it. Dylan Raiola is a true freshman. Very few true freshmen get to start in college football. Very, very, very few have real successful seasons. And I think Nebraska, and I think Matt Rule's a smart guy. Hopefully we continue to run the football and integrate him into the offense week after week. The good thing about this schedule, it's relatively backloaded, right? I mean, a lot of the better teams are on the back half. I think if you'd ask anybody, that's probably how you'd want your schedule to be instead of top loaded. But I'm with you. They could lose to Colorado. I mean, that definitely could happen. We could slip up against an Illinois or maybe a Purdue or a Rutgers in there. Indiana will be relatively tough since it's our first basically road game. I do know Purdue's in there, but I don't count Purdue. Ohio State, tough game, yes. UCLA, they might be better than what we think. USC, there's another team, as we've talked about, on the road. That's a tough one too. And Wisconsin, Iowa, you said it best right there to end that, was that these teams have been better than us in the last decade. They have been. I mean, there's facts out there that prove that. The ceiling, though, and I think if things go really, really well, Raiola fits in really well, we protect him, defense plays like it should, I think 10 wins. And I know that sounds crazy. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Would be something starting off 7-0, maybe dropping that game to Ohio State, but you beat UCLA. You can beat USC. I don't think USC is going to be a world beater. That's not a guarantee. And who's to say maybe Wisconsin doesn't improve as much as we think, and maybe you drop a game against Iowa to end the year or vice versa. So it's out there for Nebraska to do something like that this year. They're going to have to be better this season because, man, the Big Ten is only getting harder, and Matt Rule, man, programs want to see improvement from year 1 to year 2. Now, Matt Rule's always been great at that, Christian, and you know that. But I like I said, 10-2 would be the ultimate ceiling this year, and I hope it happens.